They told him not to hike alone, especially not after sunset. Warnings like that don't stick when you've already run out of places to be. Adam didn't listen. He never had. That's how he lost Sarah. He hadn't cheated, not exactly. But a relationship can rot from the inside without ever breaking its skin. Lies, absences, versions of himself that he gave to everyone but her. When she left, she didn't cry. She just said, "You could burn a house down and still stand in the ashes wondering why it's cold." The words stuck to him more than her absence. Once Adam had lived the kind of life that looks enviable from far away. City lights at night, the glitter of wet streets under street lamps, weekend escapes with friends who drank too much but always seemed in control, promises that sounded like poetry when he said them, until they didn't. He had people who trusted him. One of them was Sarah, his fiancée. But lies pile up like ash, and sooner or later, someone breathes in. By the time she left, she wouldn't even say his name, only that same sentence. So he left. He sold what little he had worth selling, stuffed the rest into a single duffel, and booked a place he couldn't pronounce. A village deep in the mountains, the kind that didn't appear on most maps. He wanted somewhere far enough that no one could connect who he was with who he'd been. The drive-in was long, the road curling along cliff edges like it had been drawn by hand. The air thinned as he climbed, trading the city's heat for a biting cold that carried the scent of pine and something older. Patches of fog clung to the slopes, reluctant to let go. The house they gave him was small, pressed between two others like it was hiding. Its walls were dark stone, scarred by weather and time. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of wood smoke, even though the fireplace was cold. The floor groaned with each step, a slow, tired complaint. The woman who handed him the key had hair streaked silver, skin lined by years rather than age. Her eyes searched his face as if trying to place him in some memory she didn't trust. And just as he turned to go, she said, "If you hear her humming, turn around and go back inside." Her voice carried no superstition, only certainty, the kind that leaves no room for laughter. Adam gave a polite smile. He didn't believe in ghosts. He only believed in leaving. By the second evening, the stillness of the village felt wrong. No dogs barking, no radios, no idle conversations bleeding from one open window to another. Just silence, dense, unbroken. Adam told himself a short walk would be harmless. The sun was slipping behind the ridges, bleeding orange into the clouds. A footpath wound away from the village, swallowed quickly by cedar and pine. The further he went, the more the air seemed to thicken. The smell of moss rose damp and sharp from the earth, and every sound, the rustle of leaves, the crack of a twig, seemed closer than it should be. It was like stepping into a memory that didn't belong to him. Then, the humming, soft, distant. Not a melody, but deliberate, with pauses that felt chosen. He stopped. Between two ancient cedars stood a woman. Her hair was black and heavy, falling in a single sheet to her waist, drinking in the last of the light. Her face was striking, cheekbones carved sharp, lips full and unmoving, eyes dark enough to hide in. She wore crimson, the fabric flowing with a weight that made it seem alive, and from beneath its hem, hooves, polished black, catching a flicker of dying sunlight. They rested perfectly on the earth without sinking into the damp soil. Her gaze was steady, her head tilted almost imperceptibly, as if assessing whether he was worth the trouble. Adam's breath stalled, not out of fear, at least not yet, but out of the strange pull she had. It wasn't beauty alone. It was the kind of presence that felt like a hand on the back of your neck, guiding you forward without touching you. He blinked. She was gone. He walked back faster than he meant to, the forest pressing close behind him. That night, he dreamed of hooves striking stone, of smoke curling through a black sky, of a voice, low, close, whispering a name he didn't know, right into his ear. He woke damp with sweat, the air in the room thick, as if the forest had followed him home. The dreams worsened. Every night the same rhythm, hooves on stone first, deep as heartbeats, then humming, low, close, as though it rose from the marrow of his bones. And then her face, turning toward him at the very instant he woke. He stopped eating. His body felt hollow, driven by something older than hunger. In the streets, villagers no longer smiled. They passed him like smoke, as though avoiding his shadow. Yet he couldn't stay away. By the third night, the silence of his rented house pressed too heavily on the walls. He walked into the woods again. This time she didn't vanish. She was waiting in the clearing, beneath the fractured moonlight, a figure of unbearable stillness. Her hair was a river of black. Her dress shimmered crimson, darker at the hem where it touched the roots. Her eyes held no light, yet they fixed him with a weight that anchored him in place. Adam stepped closer, once, twice, before he froze. That's when he saw them clearly. Her feet, half hidden by her dress, not feet at all but polished, blackened hooves pressing into the soil. The sight clawed at the edges of his mind. A detail wrong enough to split beauty into horror. And then before he could speak, she was gone. He stumbled back to the village, shaking, unsure if he'd imagined it. The next morning, he found her, the woman who had given him the key on his first night. She was standing at his door as though she had been waiting. Her scarf was pulled tight around her head, her eyes clouded yet sharp, the kind that had watched too many winters. She didn't ask to come in, but he stepped aside, and she entered. She sat by the fire, silent until the logs cracked. "You've seen her." Adam said nothing. His throat burned with the memory of that clearing, with the wrongness of those hooves. The old woman's gaze never wavered. They called her Lalla Aïcha, a countess once in the time of war, her husband taken, her kin slaughtered. She did not flee. She fought, and for every wound she gave, the mountain remembered. The words hung heavy, like the air before rain. But grief like that does not end. It grows teeth. It asks for more. She walks still, because history left her unfinished. Adam swallowed, but his mouth was dry. The old woman leaned forward, her hand trembling as she pressed something into his palm. A stub of white candle, worn nearly to its wick. "When the humming comes, don't follow. Don't answer. The mountain doesn't take without being given. Light this. Leave it where she waits. It won't stop her. Nothing will. But it may remind her you know what was lost." And just like that, she stood and left. Adam sat there for a long time, staring at the candle. It was absurd. It was superstition. And yet, when night fell, he found himself walking the path again, the candle clutched in his fist. At the cedar where she had stood, he knelt. He pressed the stub into the dirt, struck a match, and watched the flame bite the air. The forest held its breath. No humming came, but the silence felt heavier. The candle burned low beneath the cedar, its little flame shivering in the breeze. Adam sat back on his heels waiting, though, for what he couldn't say. The forest around him wasn't silent tonight. It breathed. It shifted. Branches swayed, though there was no wind, and the earth seemed to listen. And then it came again. The humming. Not distant this time. Not beyond the trees, but close. Close enough that his skin tightened as though the sound itself were touching him. He stood. At the edge of the clearing she appeared. Not as a blur, not as a silhouette in fog, but fully, impossibly there, the woman. Her beauty was the kind that felt sharpened, dangerous. Skin pale in the moonlight, lips as red as a cut, black hair spilling past her waist, each strand gleaming like water caught in shadow. And then, the wrongness. Her dress shifted with the wind, and for the briefest moment he saw them again. Her feet. Not flesh, not bone, but dark polished hooves pressing into the earth, glinting faintly as though slick with dew. The sight sent a cold lance through his chest, beautiful, terrible, inescapable. Her eyes met his, dark, endless, reflecting nothing back. And yet, they mourned. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Adam stepped forward. His legs trembled, but something deeper than willpower pulled him closer. Her hand rose, pale, elegant, fingers too fine for soil, too steady for the living. And though every thought in his body screamed to stop, Adam lifted his own and placed it in hers. The world shattered. There was no clearing, no forest, no mountain, only fire. The crack of hooves on stone, soldiers in foreign colors, shouts torn by war. He felt dust fill his lungs, heat scorch his face, steel tear the night, and her, younger, fierce, drenched in grief but unbroken. He saw her husband dragged through the dirt, bound, faceless soldiers jeering. He saw her home ransacked, her kin cut down one by one, her hands trembling not with fear but with rage. He saw her stand in the ruins, knife in hand, a crimson veil across her hair, alone, but not silent. He felt her vengeance, sharp, unrelenting, burning brighter than the torches that reduced her world to ash. And he felt the wound of it, the wound that never closed. She did not die. She became this, bound not to earth or heaven, but to the unfinished story. Adam tore his hand back, gasping, falling to his knees in the dirt. His chest heaved as if he'd been running. His skin was clammy, his pulse wild. When he looked up, she was gone. Only the candle remained, guttering low, the flame struggling but refusing to die, and the forest was silent once more. The next morning, the villagers noticed his door ajar. The bed was made, the fire, cold ash, his shoes gone. Adam hadn't packed a bag, he hadn't left a note, only the candle stub remained on the table, burned to nothing. They say someone saw him, just before dusk, walking up the trail alone, slow, steady. His face pale but calm, as if he had finally found something to move toward instead of away from. As he climbed, memories pressed against him harder than the mountain air. Sarah's voice, her last words, "You could burn a house down and still stand in the ashes wondering why it's cold." She had been right. He had destroyed everything warm and then stood wondering why he froze. He had never managed to apologize, not in a way that reached her. Words had failed. He had failed. But here, in the silence of these mountains, another voice, one older, one wounded like his, had given him a chance at something beyond words. Repentance. Not to Sarah, not to the living, but to the dead, to the unfinished, to the story that refused to rest. Perhaps he could not mend his own betrayals, but he could offer himself to hers. The forest grew darker as he walked, the trail narrowed, swallowed by mist, and when the humming rose again, he didn't resist. He didn't turn back. At the edge of the clearing, she waited. Aïcha, veiled in moonlight, her beauty as sharp as grief, her hooves pressed into the soil like a brand, claiming what was hers. This time, Adam didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, hands empty, chest open, her eyes fixed on him, not burning, not pleading, simply accepting. And then the forest swallowed them both. The villagers whisper it still. Not of Adam, they do not say his name, but of her. The mountain widow. The countess who lost everything, who never left. They say she still walks when the fog grows thick, searching not for love, but for witness. And they say a man once gave himself to her willingly, because sometimes the living can only atone by joining the dead. And if you ever hear her humming, low, steady, pulling through the trees, don't follow, don't listen, and never ever answer, because the mountain remembers, and so does she.